New Year is a time for reflecting on our relationships. You might think that the disciples of Jesus had a wonderful relationship with one another, but sadly that was often not the case. And of course this is the same in our families, in our communities, even in our churches. The passage we're going to read describes a question that the disciples had, for which Jesus had a surprising answer. When they had come to Capernaum, those who received the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he had come into their house, Jesus anticipated him, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers?" Peter said to him, "From strangers." Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them for me and you." At that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to them, set him in the midst of them, and said, "Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of offences, for offences must come, but woe to that man by whom the offence comes. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into the everlasting fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hell fire. Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? And if he should find it, assuredly I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you 1 or 2 more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. Assuredly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again I say to you, that if 2 of you agree on earth concerning anything that they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. Then Peter came to him and said, "Lord, How often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Who is the greatest? That's a question that intrigues, motivates, and drives people all over the world and in every sphere of life. Alexander the Great wept when he found there was no more worlds to conquer. Muhammad Ali called himself the greatest in the boxing ring for a brief while, but then he descended into the tragedy of Parkinson's disease. And billions cheer on the footballing elite, hoping their team will be the champions, if only for a year. And then, of course, there's University Challenge. I read an article in the paper by a student reflecting on the utter failure of him and his team in the competition. Jeremy Paxman, the former gorilla of hapless politicians, is now the question master for University Challenge, and he described this team as possibly the worst ever. Ouch. But then there is the Kingdom of Heaven Challenge, otherwise known as Discipleship Explored. How do we stand in this? The rules are a bit different because the disciples get to ask the questions, but they also need to answer them in thought, word and deed. We're going to look together at 3 questions that arose in the disciples' minds and are in this passage today. Firstly, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Well, before we answer it, we need to ask, what provoked the question? Well, it seems to me it was Jesus paying the temple tax for Peter. Jesus' motivation was to teach Peter very important lessons in discipleship, the boundaries of Christian liberty. You see, it's a balance, the Christian life. We live out of grace because the redemption money has been paid for us. But we also are not to give offence to those with less light on their path. However, this lesson to Peter ended up with the other disciples being offended. How come Peter gets his tax paid? It seems likely that what provoked the question was that they were jealous of the preferential treatment Peter was receiving. Jesus graciously and memorably answers the question for them. He puts a child before them and says that even to enter the kingdom of heaven, to be converted, they need to become like a little child. In what sense? Smallness, weakness, innocence, or dependency? Humphrey, our pastor in Edinburgh, preached on this text once and emphasised the last of these, dependency. Afterwards, Shiri sent a picture of our baby son in a bucket having a bath. Completely dependent. Imagine one of our adult sons being put in that situation. It was cute when they were a month old, but it would be humbling if they had to do it now. But this is the answer Jesus gives. He who humbles himself like this child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. How can we humble ourselves? I'd suggest it's a more active thing than mere dependency. It's about not giving or taking offence. Accepting being washed in a bucket. This was the lesson Jesus was teaching Peter. Don't give or take unnecessary offence. And Jesus here extends it to the rest of the disciples. Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He who humbles himself and becomes like a little child by not giving or taking offence. Which leads us to the second question. How can a disciple of Jesus give or take offence? Before we answer this question, we need to ask, what is meant by offences here? The Greek word is the one that gives us the English word scandal. The meaning of the word in Greek is of a stick with bait on it to entrap an animal in a snare. When we give or take unnecessary offence, it leads to scandal. It leads to ourselves or others being entrapped in sin. Jesus refers prophetically to one example, that of Judas. First, he took offence. He was scandalised by Jesus' teaching and behaviour. Then he gave offence. He scandalised the name of the church by betraying Jesus into the hands of men. First taking offence, then giving offence. This worst case scenario leads to one of the most chilling and searching warnings that Jesus ever gave in verses 8 and 9. It would be better for that person if a millstone were tied around his neck and he were drowned in the midst of the sea. So what offences does Jesus warn about? Well, there are 4 mentioned here. Firstly, breaking of the 10 Commandments. These verses, in verses 8 and 9, are a repeat of what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, where he warns about the heart sins of adultery, murder, greed, and pride. Breaking these commands causes scandal, and we need to take extreme measures to prevent ourselves from such scandalous thoughts, words, and deeds. Secondly, despising of the little ones in verse 10. Disciples are called to live in a loving relationship with one another, even when it's not easy to do so. If a brother or sister causes us problems, it's easy to say, "Oh, it's beneath my dignity to deal with them." This seems to have been a prevalent attitude to actual children among the disciples. On other occasions, they tried to send mothers with children away from Jesus. Perhaps we find that hard to understand, but perhaps also we need to consider what is our attitude to the children in our neighbourhoods who are being brought up with no knowledge of Jesus or opportunity to hear about him. Thirdly, neglecting of little ones in verses 12 to 14. Jesus makes clear our ongoing responsibility for one another, and especially when we get into trouble. This new year, why not make a list of all your contacts and ask the Lord to show you who it is you can bless in a way that will really help them out of trouble. Maybe focus on someone who won't be blessed by anyone else. Like Abraham blessing his nephew Lot. I will bless you so that you will be blessing others too, we sang in the children's song. It would have been easy for Abraham to say, well, Lot's got himself into this scrape. He can stew in his own juice a bit. Instead, Abraham raised a posse and went out to recover Lot and his family, who had been captured by their enemies. And fourthly, disorder in relationships, and especially in church relationships in verses 15 to 20. A very important part of not despising or neglecting our relationships is to approach offences in an orderly way. And so Jesus teaches us here how to go about things. How do we respond when someone says or does something against us? Oh, brother, let me tell you what we almost certainly do. We go and tell someone else about it. What Jesus tells his disciples to do is to go and speak to them directly. Brother, sister, mother, daughter, father, son, I want a good relationship with you. But it means we have to sort out this difficulty between us. Can we please do this? I know it will be a bit painful, but the alternative is far worse. I could just brush it under the carpet in the interests of peace and pain-free living, but it really needs to be sorted out. Now, that would be fine and dandy if such an approach always worked, but sadly, because of human sin, it does not. It may take time, and we need to give it time. Or it may take another approach. We may need to approach a brother who has caused or taken unnecessary offence with another person or two. Why do we need to take this step? Well, the reason is here, as a witness. Now, a witness is not to take sides, but to keep impartial notes of the exchanges. So someone trusted by both sides, and someone who is a peacemaker, not likely to just cause more trouble. That's a very challenging role. And remember, the goal of the exercise is to achieve reconciliation, not further division. Again, hopefully this orderly process has the desired effect of not causing further hardening and division. If things are unresolved at this stage, then and only then is an offence, given or taken, to be brought to the whole church. And I don't think we need to specifically think of the New Testament church in this context. Such discipline was also in practice in the synagogue, even if it was misapplied. Bringing the matter to the whole church, it seems to me, is a matter for one of the one or two witnesses and not for the original plaintiff. Again, the aim of doing so is not to vindicate one side and condemn the other, but that reconciliation should be achieved with God and between members. Paul pleaded with the Corinthian church to be reconciled, and he also pleaded very publicly with Euodia and Syntyche to make up to each other in the church in Philippi. On both occasions, this must have been after the churches had already tried to achieve peace, but shows the seriousness of the situation that ensued. It threatened the whole church. And these disputes have been public knowledge for 2,000 years now. We don't know if they were dissolved. What a legacy. We could leave it to the day of judgment, but surely much better to get it right with one another and with God as soon as possible. How can a disciple of Jesus give or take offence? By breaking God's commandments, by despising and neglecting these little ones, or by disorderly behaviour. Now, if you think this is a difficult and challenging thing, this not giving or taking offence, this dealing with offences without despising or neglecting, this orderly approach to offence, you are not alone. It searches every one of us to the core. It's red and raw for all of us, including for Peter. And so we come to the last of the three questions. Peter asks in verse 21, "How many times shall I forgive my brother?" Now, Peter's natural brother was Andrew, and you can just imagine what it was like for Peter having Andrew as a younger brother. Imagine what he might have said about Andrew. Well, for a start, Andrew just doesn't subscribe to my great ideas. And then Andrew and John, his mate, introduced me to their dodgy friends. Andrew also seems to think that I'm always putting my foot in it and saying things that would cause offence. And Andrew really just doesn't respect my status as his older brother. Andrew's so weak and timid when it comes to fishing trips on stormy seas. Andrew's always bringing people along who I need to sort out. And Andrew is great at silences the pregnant pause when you know what he's thinking. But you know what? It's only 7 things. So just to show what a big-hearted guy I am, I've still forgiven him. He is my kid brother, after all. Just as long as he doesn't do it again. Sadly for Peter, Jesus had some news for him. Another 483 times to go, Peter. And to show him what he means, Jesus takes him back to the subject of taxation through the parable of the unforgiving servant that follows. The temple tax Jesus had paid for Peter was a token tax. It symbolised the need we all have to be redeemed from sin. But had Peter understood the reality behind the symbol? It seems not. far from just helping out with Peter's bills and ensuring no unnecessary offence was given to the religious authorities, Jesus was showing Peter that the totally irredeemable burden of sin would be dealt with by Jesus' own death and resurrection. And he's showing this to us too. If we grasp this, if we grasp the gospel that Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners by dying on the cross to pay our debt, then how could we ever be looking to squeeze the life out of our brother, our sister, our father, our daughter, by seeking revenge? Well, these questions are a much bigger challenge than University Challenge. For not only do we need to answer the questions right, but we need to evidence the answers in lives changed by the light of the gospel. Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Vinton, St. Catherine's College, Oxford? Answer: whoever humbles himself and becomes as a little child, not giving or taking offence. I'm going to go through my relationships and deal with where I've caused or taken offence. How can a disciple of Jesus cause or take offence? Scott, Abertay University of Life, Dundee. Answer: by breaking God's commandments, or by disdain or neglect of my brother, or by disorderly behaviour. I'm going to work out how to use my Christian liberty in a way that doesn't offend others, with less light than me. How many times should I forgive my brother? Backer, St. Andrews University. Answer: 490 times. I'm going to work at losing count beyond 7, because God can't even count that far. Children of the heavenly King, as ye journey sweetly sing, sing your Saviour's worthy praise, glorious in his works and ways. We are travelling home to God, in the way the fathers trod. They are happy now, and we soon their happiness shall see. Lift your eyes, ye sons of light, Zion's city is in sight. There our endless home shall be, there our Lord we soon shall see. Fear not, brethren, joyful stand on the borders of your land. Jesus Christ, your Father's Son, bids you undismayed go on. Lord, obediently we go, gladly leaving all below. Only thou our leader be, and we still will follow thee.